finished getting all those images saved? Good. I want to make sure everything is ready so I can do this without... Oh no, put that away before anyone sees! You saw nothing! Cue title sequence!
Your job's a joke, you broke. Your love life's the away. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you. When the rain starts to fall, I'll be there for you. Like I've been there before, I'll be there for you. 'Cause you're there for me too.
So it's a little late, but I'm still doing this. That's right, 4 webcomics in a single month. Now I already mentioned before what 3 of them were, while one of them is still a mystery. At least I hope it's still a mystery. But otherwise, the first 2 are more or less continuations into stuff I covered through Patreon, but have wanted to continue before because reasons. So today, we're going to look into chapters 4 through 6 of TwoKinds, as they're starting to get longer with more pages in them. I also want to repeat that whatever I say here is not an exact opinion on the comic overall, because I intend to go through all of the currently completed chapters before giving any sort of final thoughts as a whole. This is merely for these chapters, just as it was like last time. One more thing I need to bring up is how apparently I had missed a crucial detail about the creator, Tom, in that he is actually the older brother to Mark Fishbach. Yeah, I only looked on the TwoKinds About page, as it didn't show it, yet it does on the fan wiki. But someone brought up that Tom is actually related to Markiplier, someone I tend to see tweets about on occasion, but never bothered looking at videos for because I just wasn't interested. I mean, it's cool that 2 brothers can have their own successes on the web, but either way, unless it has something to do with the comic itself, I'd think they should be able to stand on their own without their reliance on another's popularity. So with that out of the way, let's kick off the month by seeing what can happen next. Previously on TwoKinds, Trace took Flora to this town to heal her up, only for his friends to come in, and it led to an awkward situation that was immediately resolved through pizza. He and Flora were last seen in bed, and this is where we continue things. Chapter 4 begins on a flashback from 4 years ago, when Flora was a slave to the family of Kay, someone who does appear much later on in the story. She got to see a little bit of Trace just after his little mental breakdown and takeover of the Grand Templar role, and is nearly run over by another oncoming wagon, but is rescued by Euchre? I really hope I'm saying that right. Who looks like Abel from Trinity Blood, while acting like Shitan Uzuki from Xenogears, in that this guy has something to hide. Either way, he's also a slave, but is still willing to help her if she ever needs him. Back to reality, Trace wakes up to find Flora on top of him in yet another questionable position. In bed? You? I? We did it. We couldn't have. Yeah, we did. It was really fun. For you, maybe, considering how animals do it. It's any wonder how he can survive it. But no, they didn't actually do it. Also, to reiterate how Kadrin aged similarly to actual animals, we learn she is actually 11 years old, resulting in a rather cliche but cute underage joke. Because she scratched him accidentally, Trace wonders if she really does like an animal or not, but stops when he runs into Keith again. They talk, and with Trace going to Flora, it seems he wants to bring him along again. Flora is reluctant, but allows it after Trace brings up a point that if they do what he wanted, they'll have time to be alone together. I think it was then that I realized I didn't really intend on ever leaving her. Well, yeah, you leave a kitten alone and it goes nuts! Always keep your cats on surveillance, or bad things will happen to your stuff. Putting on his Smash Brothers shirt, Flora!
Where the heck are
pants.
Yeah, starting from now on, she chooses not to wear pants most of the time. Now, to be fair, and this is why I chose to remove the age rating restriction off the previous video, since they never go as far as showing the extra naughty details I mentioned, then this isn't any different from, say, Cheetah from Justice League, or hell, Cat from Breath of Fire 2, who's been getting away with this no pants thing for years. Anyway, she's hungry, but being a carnivore, she only eats meat. She jokes about wanting human flesh, which gets him to look elsewhere. Putting herself down for letting her Cadron side take over, she hears a familiar voice. Yep, Euchre. Seems he was captured, and since Flora is attached to him, she wants to free him. Only problem is that he's been sold to royalty, meaning the only one who could possibly buy him no matter what would be the Grand Templar, aka Trace, because now that I have played Bravely Default, I know that his kind can have the priorities of a ruler. Anyway, she rushes to Trace just as he and Keith were talking about how the Basseton need the support from humans. She begs him to free her friend, but Keith says it would be a bad idea because if it's a male they might bang. Okay, there is a reason to why he continually thinks poorly of Cadron, but we'll need to get there first. For now, Trace fails to listen to him after seeing her teary kitten eyes and agrees to help out. So after seeing who they have to save, while Flora and Euchre talk in their language, Trace goes to the owner to see what he can do. But guess what? The new Grand Templar has a bounty on you that I intend on collecting. Oh god, Bravely is out for blood in this universe too! Since his powers were crippled, he's even weaker than an apprentice it seems. But when Flora comes to help him and is knocked back, something in Trace snaps. It seems something is trying to control him while accessing power that was from that tower nearby. It goes by a bit too fast for my liking, but otherwise I feel like this little awakening he has right now would be intimidating to say the least. His little aura dragons are indeed a threat though, as they attack anyone nearby and also destroy the wagon Euchre is in. Also, it seems his magic power has gone up to where he can either warp or make illusions super fast. Now I'm not sure, but it looks like he kills the guy as we don't see him in the next page, or any of the dragons for that matter. Actually, and this is something you may have seen already, but the writing and the pacing feel completely off. There's not a real steady flow during action scenes, and it often feels rushed than even Fairy Tail would have it. Anyway, he attacks Flora, as his little mental breakdown told him that Cadron are not to be trusted ever, which causes her to enrage again. But the tower overloads and begins to collapse. Trace returns to normal and has no idea what happened. Euchre seems to know something, but again, he's like Shaitan and doesn't want to tell since they don't have time. He does tell Flora though that he was being controlled by someone in the tower. Not the new Grand Templar though, as they wouldn't want anyone killed, but rather someone who doesn't care for either side. And it's the masked lady from before, Ephemeral. I know I botched that one, so I'm going by her other name, Neutral. Also, the one-winged Templar isn't happy that her plan failed and destroyed his tower, nor am I sure we even see him again after this. For now, we only know that Neutral wants balance, and it involves getting Flora to grow some hatred. That night, Euchre tries to ask Flora about why she's helping Trace, and well, she doesn't want to admit it, even if it's like this one time, but she's starting to fall for him. Meanwhile, more complaining from Keith, and there's an evil penguin nearby? Why? What purpose does it serve? He dreams about being back on his home island. We meet some Basseton that will be relevant later, and his father, and it turns out he ended up killing both of his birth parents and was banished? Usually they just kill you for that, but whatever. Chapter 5 begins, and oh god, it's the lake scene from Final Fantasy X. Are Trace and Flora going to make out underwater now? I mean, she's here because Euchre told her to wash her fur there, but Trace shows up as he wants to apologize for what happened before. Knowing how scared she is, he assumes she wants to go with Euchre and tries to leave it at that. But it seems she's still attached to him and latches on. Like she would, she'll accept his apology on one condition, and it pretty much leads to a...
What is actually happening?
That was good, but you know you can brush harder. My fur isn't that fragile.
What Yosuke is seeing.
Oh, that feels great. Harder, harder!
Ew!
It seems Flora is curious if Trace really sees her as not just being another Cadron, and when he holds her hand, she thinks back to how Kay used to be friends with her until a year ago when he didn't consider it to be normal. It just seems like she doesn't want to go through pain again, but continues getting back into him. She's certainly bipolar on this. This goes against the basic principles of every known race. Never stopped anyone before. Besides, at least her kind can function like yours. They're technically not breaking any fantasy rules. Next morning, Euchre talks to Trace about how Flora is like a sister to him, and is just warning him that if he ever did anything to hurt her, he would likely do something about it. Because yeah, it isn't fully love, but it's sounding like they're close to boyfriend-girlfriend status. But Keith warns him about how he thinks Cadron women work. In particular, those her age don't often stay with the same person for more than a few weeks. Again, it's part of something that will be brought up in a bit, as he knows more than he lets on about his experience. Poor Flora. It seems Euchre is leaving them now. Well, misunderstanding the situation just after Keith told him a possible situation, but it's cleared up and they separate. 2 weeks later, they get lost. Trace is separated even though he was barely 2 feet away from his friends, which gives Flora and Keith some alone time. She asks why he hates her kind so much, and he just says that their kind are different, and that he shouldn't even be talking to her anyway. So, I guess Keith the Basseton hates me? What about Keith the person? Good point. I mean, shouldn't individuality be more upfront than just judging solely on race? Individuals have more to say than just the actions of others. Well, no time for that. Trace is in trouble. A feral Cadron is nearby, and Trace mistakes it for Flora. How? Her hair is a darker color, you nincompoop! No. It's either this one lacks the necklace he gave her, or her breast size is different. Given the consistencies in how the necklace appears despite being hidden in the tuft, I'm really not sure what he's thinking, or what the panel implies. Not wanting to go berserk again, it looks like he's accepting his fate, only for the thing to start humping him. Great, but Flora and Keith show up to save him, and we learn what that was all about. Turns out, if a Cadron experiences enough mental trauma, their minds will shut down and revert back to a primitive state, which becomes irreversible after about a day. As for the humping, that's just a female Cadron thing. In the meantime, Euchre has run into that guy that keeps showing up at every turn. The wiki has him named as Edmund, and actually both are more important than it would seem. But for now, I'll just say that Euchre is revealed to be a Templar himself! Boy, it's like the suspicious kind adult is actually someone suspicious and possibly bad. Considering even the Templars are after Trace, I hate to imagine what he's secretly planning. Anyway, it's hinted that it might be getting close to that time, which is talk for she's going in heat soon. Nothing really happens otherwise, besides Keith having some letter from his past that causes him pain that he starts ripping up, which is found by Flora as it was from Keith's wife?
What a twist!
But more importantly, Neutral is nearby, and nothing comes of it. Next morning, when Keith checks up on her, she started to go into heat. And yeah, more misunderstandings cause Keith to run off, but Flora tells Trace he didn't mean to hit her. Since Trace is a little outraged from before, it seems he's got healing powers now and fixes her up. He can also teleport, which means they should warp to the harbor, right? Okay, no, he would probably have to know where it is still. Anyway, we now learn why Keith is so against Cadron. Turns out, after arriving on mainland, after his little banishment, a Fox Cadron family took him in and helped raise him as their own. He fell in love with their daughter and even asked to court her. The parents didn't mind, but they warned him about what females tend to do, but he brushed it off. He asked her to marry him, but 2 days before the wedding, she never came back because she was sleeping with another Cadron.
That no good cheating tramp!
So if anything, he's just suffering from a broken heart. but rather than keep the blame to the one who actually broke it, he has to put it out on everyone else. They warned him about one of their racial habits, and even after all the care they gave him, he had to take it out on them all. Yes, he was banished from his homeland, so he has already suffered mentally, and this of course just contributed to his troubles, but it still astounds me that people are willing to forget about the good times with others who have never hurt him just because of someone else's actions. Either way, Flora feels bad for him as she remembers her mother telling her that until she hits the age of 14, she wouldn't be able to devote herself to just one person. And she was supposed to be married to Seth earlier, but already forgot about him. So she's worried the same could happen between her and Trace. The chapter comes to a bittersweet end as Keith remembers the same kind of words Flora is saying but from his old lover, and the feeling of betrayal and how it will likely happen to them. Now, this next chapter, being a two-parter, is what I feel is, so far, to be the weakest one of them all. Considering it's still within the constant arc-shifting 3 days a week pattern we've seen so far, it's not like we've hit the stage of where the series improves in my opinion, but oh boy. It starts with Flora inside another one of those towers, but with Neutral, believing that Trace has left her despite the ending of the last chapter. She goes on to tell her what happened from 2 days ago. When they arrived at the port with the ominous tower looming over them, Flora got to apologize to Keith in the meantime, and she was still in heat, so she was a bit pissy. They run into Edmund again, and Trace still doesn't recognize the fact that he's everywhere, and that the boats won't be ready for a few days. When they go to the tavern, the owner comes up to him and says that his wife is here. And then we go back to the present with Trace's friends outside the tower, looking for him. And then Flora talks about how 2 days ago, how she was feeling and got emotional about the whole wife thing. The tavern keeper talks to her in the bathhouse and is part of a resistance group offering to take her home. And then we see Trace's wife, whose name is Saria. Like, so much to absorb, especially since we keep jumping around every few pages. It seems Saria has either an illness or has a weak body, but Trace goes to check up on Flora, and it's like she thinks he doesn't like her anymore. And it's made worse when Trace talks to Saria about how they met, and he nonchalantly says that there isn't anything between them since despite being friends, she's still a Cadron. She runs into Keith and asks why she had to be a Cadron. And for once, Keith says something sensible. You are who you are. You can't change that. We're both covered in fur. We look different from humans. But inside, we're still people. And really, that's about the one really good thing about this chapter. It addresses the idea that just because you're different, it doesn't mean you aren't still people. And he does confront Trace about this, so he really is serious about what he just said, and how he's not too happy about Trace's potential relationship break. But it turns out he only said that because he didn't want to tell Saria on how he really felt. In other words, another misunderstanding. Which will bite him later because the lady from before, it's really Neutral. Also, I will admit, the cover page for part 2 looks pretty neat. But here is where things get really messy. Without any sort of explanation to how or when exactly this happens, Database Error and Group sees Flora wreaking havoc while wearing the mask Neutral wears. And wait. They know the name of the demigod? Alright, some of them are Templars, so I guess they know what their gods can look like. So DBE sends his friends off so he can fight her. Now it looks like Trace is confronting her. When did this happen? And Neutral claims to be speaking for Flora since she had feelings she couldn't say. Really, it seems that her body got possessed and it wasn't what she really wanted, but hey, it's a god. They can do whatever they want. Either way, Neutral brings up the stuff Trace said about Flora is just a Cadron and that, and she finally reveals that she was the one who stole his memories. Now, it's been implied that his original self was the one who would hurt people and who hated Cadron, which means there's something else that had an effect on him in his past to cause it, but now because of his earlier outburst, he doesn't want to even remember his past self, as he doesn't want to hurt Flora, which goes against Neutral's plans, and, well, at a later date I'll go over exactly why her plans kinda suck. Meanwhile, as Rain is looking for her mother inside the tower, we see that her mother is with Euchre, and how he's going to help her this time. With what though? Well, hold that thought. Trace tries to fight but get his butt handed to, and he refuses to give in to his memories because he really does care for her. Against Neutral's expectations, he admits that it was never about race with him. It was just about Flora, and he really does love her. But oh, can't continue on this emotional revelation. Rewind a page and Keith had to stop DBE from attacking Flora. Couldn't this page happen beforehand? Neutral states that she's going to seal Flora's memories away, so his little speech would mean nothing. Trace feels like he's failed, and then Karen throws something at him, is now in a chair trying to cheer him up from despair with a flag?
I'm so confused.
Euchre shows up to help and reveals to Trace the reasons for not giving up to the masked gods and whatnot, and hands him a sword to fight her with, which breaks. Yeah. And if he doesn't do something, the energy from Flora will drain and will just be an empty shell. Edmund, now in robes, shows up to assist Euchre, as apparently Neutral is very close to bringing back Trace's original memories. Meaning the little spark of inspiration did nothing. But rather than convert back to normal, he's transitioned into something else. Something darker that turns his bangs black instead of red. This transformation doesn't change anything, as he's now going to attack Neutral even if it means hurting Flora.
Well, we're boned.
Fearing the worst, Edmund convinces Euchre to forget the rules for once and interfere. He does so by showing him memories of all the times Trace has been with Flora. It's just all going by so fast, and it's not easy to follow. Now, it seems Neutral ends up killing Euchre, which snaps Trace out of his trance. But Edmund reveals that she's still wearing the necklace he gave to Flora, and it helps in snapping her out of Neutral's control, as everything Trace said earlier is going into her mind. Well, for a more physical representation, Trace, naked in this scene, is told by Edmund that this is his only chance to tell Flora how he really feels, and well, you know how it goes. He tells her that he loves her too. It causes Neutral to start losing control. Mary shows up to confirm this, and as Neutral prepares to kill her, Trace stops her, and finally, Flora is free. Rain is finally reunited with her mother after all this time, and despite a few quips from Keith, he shows his relief for his two friends as well. He guards the room they go in, and it looks like Flora thought it was just a bad dream. And it's looking like things go back to normal for her. Shortly after, Keith informs Trace that not only is Euchre gone, but so is the whole town. In fact, the entire town was an illusion, and all that remains is the building they're in, and some grave near some abandoned equipment. Saria is still here, and she reveals to him that she really isn't his wife. Well, actually she is, but she doesn't want to admit that. But she does tell him that she was brought back to life by Neutral just for this little plan. The reason she had to lie to him just now is she didn't want to burden him now that he's found someone to love again, even if it's a Cadron. Because in truth, she had died to a Cadron, and that was the reason Trace hated their kind this whole time. The chapter wraps up with more Templars talking about how they need Trace alive while they're still constructing the final tower. So to make sure things go their way, they'll have dragons to send out, which could be considered an act of war, but for their plans, it'll be worth it. In addition, Trace tells DPE's group that he isn't going back with them, as it seems all the Templar are being recalled. But otherwise, it looks like their next destination is the Cadron Forest. And this is where we'll leave things off for now, but man, while progress was made, it definitely felt rushed a bit. The last chapter especially, as the stuff involving Neutral just came and went. And while we learned more, it left me feeling a bit unsatisfied with how quickly things turned out. The artwork is starting to show some signs of improvement, though it still jumps between styles a lot, but I wish the pacing could improve, and assuming I haven't said this already, it's why I get the need to cut down releases to like once or maybe twice a week. This comic wasn't even 2 years old at the time, and yet it already completed 6 chapters worth over the course of 195 pages. I have no doubt that at some point we'll start seeing that one chapter that marks the first sign of progression, that Tom really kicks into gear and makes good of his work, because right now, nothing really has changed besides some character progression and a few revelations that felt unfulfilling. The next time we come back here though, I think we'll have something exciting happen. Just a hunch. Next time, we continue looking into Skin Deep to see what Michelle is going to do with her life. Until then, I'll see you next time.